Chapter 16, Section 2, Evolution as Genetic Change. A genetic view of evolution offers a new way to look at key evolutionary concepts. Each time an organism reproduces, it passes copies of its genes to its offspring. We can therefore view evolutionary fitness as an organism's success in passing genes to the next generation. In the same way, we can view an evolutionary adaptation as any genetically controlled physiological, anatomical, or behavioral trait that increases an individual's ability to pass along its genes. Natural selection never acts directly on genes. Why? Because it is an entire organism, not a single gene, that either survives and reproduces or dies without reproducing. Natural selection, therefore, can only affect which individuals survive and reproduce and which do not. If an individual dies without reproducing, the individual does not contribute its alleles to the population's gene pool. If an individual produces many offspring, its alleles stay in the gene pool and may increase in frequency. Now recall that evolution is any change over time in the relative frequency of alleles in a population. This reminds us that it is populations, not individual organisms, that can evolve over time. Let us see how this can happen in different situations. Natural selection on single gene traits. Natural selection on a single gene traits can lead to changes in allele frequencies and thus evolution. Imagine that a hypothetical population of lizards, shown in figure 16-5, is normally brown, but experiences mutations that produce red and black forms. What happens to those new alleles? If red lizards are more visible to predators, they might be less likely to survive and reproduce, and the alleles for red coloring might not become common. Black lizards, on the other hand, might absorb more sunlight and warm up faster on cold days. If high body temperature allows them to move faster to feed and to avoid predators, they might produce more offspring than brown forms. The alleles for black color might then increase in relative frequency. If a color change has no effect on fitness, the alleles that produce it would not be under pressure from natural selection. Natural selection on polygenic traits. When traits are controlled by more than one gene, the effects of natural selection are more complex. As you learned earlier, the action of multiple alleles on traits, such as height, produces a range of phenotypes that often fit a bell curve. The fitness of individuals close to one another on the curve will not be very different, but fitness can vary a great deal from one end of such a curve to the other. And where fitness varies, natural selection can act. Natural selection can affect the distributions of phenotypes in any of three ways: directional selection, stabilizing selection, or disruptive selection. Directional selection. When individuals at one end of the curve have higher fitness than individuals in the middle or at the other end, directional selection takes place. The range of phenotypes shifts as some individuals fail to survive and reproduce while others succeed. To understand this, consider how limited resources, such as food, can affect the long-term survival of individuals and the evolution of populations. Among seed-eating birds, such as Darwin's finches, for example, birds with bigger, thicker beaks can feed more easily on larger, harder, thicker-shelled seeds. Suppose a food shortage caused the supply of small and medium-sized seeds to run low, leaving only larger seeds. Birds whose beaks enable them to open those larger seeds will have better access to food. Birds with the big beak adaptation would therefore have higher fitness than small beaked birds. The average beak size of the population would probably increase as shown in figure 16-6. Stabilizing selection. When individuals near the center of the curve have higher fitness than individuals at either end of the curve, stabilizing selection takes place. This situation keeps the center of the curve as its current position, but it narrows the overall graph, as shown in figure 16-7. The mass of human infants at birth is under the influence of stabilizing selection. Human babies born much smaller than average are likely to be less healthy and thus less likely to survive. Babies that are much larger than average are likely to have difficulty being born. The fitness of this larger or smaller individuals is, therefore, lower than that of more average-sized individuals. Disruptive selection. When individuals at the upper and lower ends of the curve have higher fitness than individuals near the middle, disruptive selection takes place. In such situations, selection acts most strongly against individuals of an intermediate type. If the pressure of natural selection is strong enough and lasts long enough, this situation can cause the single curve to split into two. In other words, selection creates two distinct phenotypes. For example, suppose a population of birds lives in an area where medium-sized seeds become less common and large and small seeds become more common. Birds with unusually small or large beaks would have higher fitness, as shown in figure 16-8. The population might split into two subgroups, one that eats small seeds and one that eats large seeds. Genetic drift. Natural selection is not the only source of evolutionary change. In small populations, an allele can become more or less common simply by chance. Recall that genetics is controlled by the laws of probability. These laws can be used to predict the overall results of genetic crosses in large populations. However, the smaller a population is, the further the results may be from what the laws of probability predict. This kind of random change in allele frequency is called genetic drift. How does genetic drift take place? In small populations, individuals that carry a particular allele may leave more descendants than other individuals just by chance. Over time, a series of chance occurrences of this type can cause an allele to become common in a population. Genetic drift may occur when a small group of individuals colonizes a new habitat. These individuals may carry alleles in different relative frequencies than did the larger population from which they came. If so, the population that they found will be genetically different from the parent population. Here, however, the cause is not natural selection, but simply chance. Specifically, the chance that particular alleles were in one or more of the founding individuals, as shown in Figure 16-9. A situation in which allele frequencies change as a result of the migration of a small subgroup of a population is known as the founder effect. One example of the founder effect is the evolution of several hundred species of fruit flies found on different Hawaiian islands. All of those species descended from the same original mainland population. Those species in different habitats on different islands now have allele frequencies that are different from those of the original species. Evolution versus genetic equilibrium. To clarify how evolutionary change operates, scientists often find it helpful to determine what happens when no change takes place. So biologists ask, are there any conditions under which evolution will not occur? Is there any way to recognize when that is the case? The answer to those questions are provided by the Hardy-Weinberg Principle, named after two researchers who independently proposed it in 1908. The Hardy-Weinberg Principle states that allele frequencies in a population will remain constant unless one or more factors cause those frequencies to change. The situation in which allele frequencies remain constant is called genetic equilibrium. If allele frequencies do not change, the population will not evolve. Under what conditions does Hardy-Weinberg Principle hold? 5 conditions are required to maintain genetic equilibrium from generation to generation. 1. There must be random mating. 2. The population must be very large. And 3. There can be no movement in or out of the population. 4. No mutations. And 5. No natural selection. In some populations, these conditions may be met or nearly met for long periods of time. If, however, the conditions are not met, the genetic equilibrium will be disruptive and populations will evolve. Random mating. All members of the population must have an equal opportunity to produce offspring. Random mating ensures that each individual has an equal chance of passing on its alleles to offspring. In natural populations, however, mating is rarely completely random. Many species, including lions and wolves, select mates based on particular heritable traits, such as size or strength. Such non-random mating means that the genes of those traits are not in equilibrium, but are under strong selection pressure. Large population. A large population size is also important in maintaining genetic equilibrium. That is because genetic drift has less effect on larger populations, such as the population of birds shown in Figure 16-10, than on small ones. No movement into or out of the population. Because individuals may bring new alleles into a population, there must be no movement of individuals in or out of a population. In genetic terms, the population's gene pool must be kept together and kept separate from the gene pools of other populations. No mutations. If genes mutate from one form into another, new alleles may be introduced into the population, and allele frequencies will change. No natural selection. All genotypes in a population must have equal probabilities of survival and reproduction. No phenotype can have a selective advantage over another. In other words, there can be no natural selection operating on the population.